Welcome to Practice Dirty, a podcast that helps women of color explore their inner well-being. I'm your host, Michaela Rose. I'm a mindfulness facilitator, podcaster, writer, and cowgirl. I've come to learn that there's an inward journey that begins at 40. This process of discovery isn't linear, and the work we have to do can be downright dirty. I'm here to help you along the way. Hi everyone, it's Michaela, and I am back with another episode of Practice Dirty. And today I have with me Dr. Chelsea Williams, and she is an amazing person. I met her up here in Bellingham, Washington at Bow Sanctuary over the last summer, and she and I have just started to kind of follow each other's orbits. She runs a great group for healers and counselors that meets monthly up here. And, you know, with this rise in outdoor therapy and ecotherapy, I couldn't think of anyone better to talk about this with, because this is exactly what she does. So Chelsea, can you please tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Hello to the listeners. Thanks for having me on, Michaela. I'll just orient myself by giving a quick introduction in language. Tansi Kewatawao, Chelsea Williams, Netsigatsun, Odpimsha Nehio Mitchif Esquewonia, Niwikenekwa Bellingham, Owl River, Laklabish, Alberta, mostly Treaty 6 territory. Mi paranti is Labocane, Cardinal, Deschanel, and Ladicour. So what I have just shared with you is a little bit about my social location, actually. Introduced myself as an Indigenous mixed Métis woman with Cree ancestry as well. And I named the land that I'm on, colonially known as Bellingham, Washington. And I named the land that I'm from, which is up north in northern Alberta. And so having a relationship with the land is actually part of the reason that I got into what is also colonially known as ecotherapy. I often refer to it as land-based practices. So, and I can share a little bit more about how I came to this work, if that feels right.
Yes, please do.
Okay, wonderful. So, as Kayla introduced me, I do have my doctorate in clinical psychology, and I went to California for schooling. I was originally born and raised up here in the Pacific Northwest. My mom moved, and my parents moved down here from Canada. And so when I went to graduate school to become a psychologist, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And academia is brutal. It is.
Yes. Yeah.
It is brutal. And the colonization and the colonialism and the supremacy that is part of the institution of academia it takes a toll. And so as I was going through school, it took me twice as long to get through school as most of the people I started my first year of graduate school with. And I had to take breaks. I couldn't sustain. And so I actually didn't know that's what I was doing at the time. I thought I was failing. But what I was doing is I was listening to my body. And when I would take breaks, I would do things like do caregiving with small children and be in the park all the time. I would do things like waitress at restaurants out on the outdoor patio on a pier down by the water. And it was something that I didn't know I needed. But I built relationships with the place I was in, with the land that I was in order to resource me and help me balance what was going on with what I was thinking was going to be this lifelong career of sitting in an office, doing therapy, doing talk therapy. So I started actually bringing some of these land-based practices into my sessions. Not because that's what I was taught to do by academia, but that's because that's what I had always done. And it has kind of morphed into, I went through the traditional, I finished my degree traditionally, I did my postdoc traditionally, and then I moved from California back up to the Pacific Northwest. And I love the culture here is pretty outdoorsy. I guess that's what it could be called. It's outdoorsy. So I started walking outside with clients, partially because I couldn't yet afford for a private practice. I couldn't yet afford
Yeah.
having a full-time office space. And people were antsy to get off of Zoom. I opened my practice about a year ago, and people were ready to get off of Zoom and get outside. And one of the beautiful things so I think I might take almost a little tangent into this concept of ecotherapy.
Go ahead.
Because as we know, every human being if on the planet, if they trace their lineage back far enough, they have an indigenous ancestor. And by indigenous, I mean someone whose ancestors were born and raised on the place that they are being born and raised upon. And that indigenous ancestor had spiritual kinship ties to the land in that place. So we could look at Irish folks who are living on Turtle Island here in North America, and we can trace them back to their indigenous roots before the Roman Catholic Church colonized Ireland and before Britain colonized Ireland. So anyone can trace their roots back to the land. And part of the power of colonization and capitalism relies on our disconnection from land. The more we are separate from the land, the emptier we feel. And what do we want to do with that emptiness? We want to fill it up in quick ways. We want quick fixes. We want to get away from our discomfort. We feel empty. We have existential crises. We go to therapy to say, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, help me. And so what I have come to find with ecotherapy, and it's such a bizarre term, it's like modern psychology is trying to find ways to help individuals when actually this is a collective wound. This is a collective wound. So we're attempting to regulate individual people when actually our broader human organism is deeply dysregulated because we are so out of sync with our original mother, who is Earth and ocean and moon and sun. So I feel like I said a lot, so I might pause and kind of check in with you and see where we can go next.
So no, I think that was a beautiful articulation of taking this trend-driven language and articulating it into what it's been at its core since before we even considered ourselves beings, in my opinion. But Chelsea, I'd like to move into disassociation with self and how getting back on the land helps us connect to who we are. Can you talk more into that? Take me into that.
Yes, absolutely. So systems of oppression rely on dissociation to function.
Okay.
If we as individuals were not highly dissociated from a day-to-day basis, capitalism would have a more difficult time thriving in the way that she does. So how I might look at dissociation is when we are severed from parts of ourself. And I would actually extrapolate that more so there's indigenous wisdom, and we can kind of look at this as how extraction from the land reverberates into the bodies. And I'll speak from my own worldview, which is that of a mixed race indigenous woman.
Okay.
So the extraction of the land, there's a parallel with extraction of indigenous female bodies. Indigenous women have always been deeply, deeply connected to the land in which that they consider their relations, that is their mother. So we have this phenomenon of missing and murdered Indigenous women,
yes,
Two-Spirit boys. And there is a severe dissociation in terms of how seriously dominant culture takes this issue. There is also a severe dissociation in how seriously we take our collective suicide as we demolish and extract the planet. We are dissociated from these phenomenons because they are so massive, we cannot take them in and properly metabolize them, primarily because the way our modern culture is set up, the way modernity is set up, is that individuals are highly isolated. We do not have collective practices that are mainstream for grieving. We do not have collective practices for mainstream for being with our women when they miscarry. We do not have collective practices for knowing how to show up for each other when we're diagnosed with autoimmune disorders. We have the media, so we get like inundated. It's like trying to take a sip of water from a fire hose with like the collective practices that are perpetuated in media and social media. So in order to tolerate and keep putting one foot in front of the other, we have to shut down parts of our soul, parts of our critical thinking, parts of our humanity, and specifically our relationship and kinship with the other than human life that surrounds us and supports us. And so one of the things that land-based practices can do when we incorporate them into therapy is it can reopen the door that has been closed between my body and the deep connection to the body that is earth and land. And I can start regulating my nervous system with the nervous system that is this beautiful organism that is earth. And we can start to visibilize the energy and the reliance and the interconnection between my body and earth body. And I don't feel so alone. And I don't feel like I'm so empty. And what I can do is I can make friends with the plants and the path that I walk and the body of water that I walk to. And I can be in good relation with them. And this is one of the things I would like to decolonize about ecotherapy is that it can be a very extractive process. I'm an individual, I'm suffering, how is the land going to help me? I actually think we can get a lot more benefit from flipping it and saying, how are you in good relation with the land? What if your soul can pour into the land the way that the land has so generously held you your whole life? And there's something that gets unlocked inside of our souls, inside of our soma, inside of our awareness when we realize that the earth loves us and we can love her back. So I'll pause on that one because that one's a special one.
That's actually perfect. And I think as someone who is worked in food and ag, and now I do work outdoors with horses and creating experiences and, workshops around connecting to self. I see that. And, it makes me want to ask you, it's like, when you see someone and they come into an outdoor setting and they're on land, whether it's with animals or not, like I always see this visceral reaction in their bodies where it's just like they start to breathe a little deeper. There's these very slight tremors because it's like you see, it's almost like energetic release, and then the shoulders drop, and you can see they've moved from head to the heart, like. With your expertise, can you talk to me more about that? Because I'm sure that women listening, whether they're walking their dog or they're in an outdoor setting, doing inner work, what is really happening with us when that occurs?
Yeah, I feel like there are multiple layers and multiple answers to this. And I would encourage every human who goes out and takes the time and attention to give this gift to themselves. I would encourage them to intuitively check in with themselves and be like, okay, what is the mechanism happening inside of me right now? And to kind of explore their own wisdom. And if I were in a therapy session, that's usually where I would start. I would say, what does your intuition tell you about this? Because this is something that we want to rekindle. There is a phenomenon in the psychotherapy field and in many fields where there are professionals or doctors or these kinds of things, where we have now deemed someone an expert on someone else's experience. And that's not quite right. I mean, we have elders who have experience and they share oral tradition and stories and wisdom. And oftentimes it's the difference between giving someone like a step by step instructions to go somewhere versus a direction, like go north. That is a direction. How that person goes north is up to them. If I get out a piece of paper and a pen and I write down turn left on Main Street and then drive for 2 miles, and then those are directions. And so the person isn't trusting their own inner compass, they're following directions. And sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need that. So that's my initial kind of response. And then to kind of zoom out a bit and talk about what's happening inside of the human ecosystem when she pauses and turns toward the larger ecosystem there is a beautiful, beautiful remembering. There is a returning. There is a coming home. And that's not something we can find in the mall. It's not something I can find in my Amazon shopping box. Can't get it on Netflix. I can't get it reading a book. I have to go outside and give Mother Earth the attention that she has so sweetly given me, despite the fact that I drive my car around and pollute her air and I'm complicit. I'm fully complicit. And she knows that. And I know that she knows that. And I'm here with her anyways. And she's here with me anyways. There's, and I'm speaking kind of in a monolith type of way about certain indigenous wisdom. And I'm just going to name that and not go into like specific teachings or these kinds of things. But there's I would say a globally recognized wisdom that when we reconnect to the land, we awaken something inside of us because we are all from the land. And when we forget that, a part of us is lost, not dead, but lost. And we feel far away and we feel very, very lonely. And loneliness, as Great Britain has deemed, is a pandemic. So there's a way that we can return home when we go outside and we are reconnecting with our siblings that are not human, whether they're four-legged or whether they're winged or whether they swim or whether they grow roots and give us oxygen. These are our siblings, and if we treated them as such, we would treat the earth much differently and we would be in a very different place climate crisis-wise.
And when you talk about coming home to ourselves, that can be a really uncomfortable place when you're first starting to do the inner work because there's
Oh, yeah.
layers of trauma. So how do we
Yes.
navigate that? Because it's not just one thing. There's many. There's aggression. There is bypass. There is lack of recognition for pain inflicted on us for generations and generations and generations. So how does a woman start where she's at in learning to come home to herself? Because often it involves looking at and processing unresolved trauma.
Yeah. Yes. So doing things outdoors can help us build stamina for what will be required of us as we turn and face squarely our shadow side, our traumas, our intergenerational history, the things that we have done to cope and survive that bring us shame. So, we live in the Pacific Northwest, so it'll be this, for the listeners, please adjust for your own location. But there are seasons here. And so when it's cold outside, I have plenty of clients who they want to go outside. If it's raining, want to go outside. If it's windy, want to go outside. And we're not looking to bask in the comfort. We're actually building a tolerance for discomfort. So there's something really valuable in being able to sit with discomfort. And for women who are racialized, women who the world racializes them with and without their consent, regardless of how they identify and the resourcing that they can pull from their own identity, heritage, lineage, ancestors. When the world racializes people, and we'll talk about women in this context, there is already a forced requirement for being very familiar with discomfort. And it's exhausting and it takes a toll on the body. And it's like, am I really, really going to go sign up for discomfort to heal the racial trauma that I did not sign up for, that the world perpetrated on me without consent, obviously? And so how do we hold compassion and space for that reality while also recognizing that it's not easy to heal from? It's not easy to heal from, and it is possible. And when I say it's possible, I don't know if it's possible in this generation. I think the reason we heal our individual bodies right now is because the people whose lives we touch, whether they're our offspring, whether they're our friends and family, whether it's ripple effects, like our body healing is intimately connected to giving permission to other people to heal as well and for the next generations. And it would be wonderful if we could live as if we were holding the next 7 generations in front of mind. And so to be a little bit specific with someone who is having a trauma response, right? Like the heart rate goes up, there's some dissociation, an out-of-body experience, maybe some hot flashes or going cold and freezing. But somebody who's invited into their body is having these kinds of experiences. At that moment, choice is paramount. One of the key factors of trauma is lack of choice. So we need to present folks with choice and not push them. They've been pushed too much. They've already been pushed too much. And so it has to be their choice how they want to enter the healing world, how they want to walk this path. Do they want to stand where they are? Do they want to back up? Do they want to talk about something else? That's okay. It has to be their choice. There's a difference between intentional pausing and waiting versus avoidance and dissociation. And it comes down to choice. We can still have the same outcome, which is we're going to talk about something else, but it has to be their choice. I can't emphasize that enough. So we go at the pace that the client's body can tolerate with their own consent. And the last thing I'll say about this is that we check in with every single part inside of the client. And if there is one no, that person drives the bus until we have full consent from everyone inside. And by everyone inside, I mean our young self, our hyperproductive self, our defensive self. We all wear multiple hats in these kinds of things. So once we get permission from every part of the client that they're all on board to do this next hard thing, which is to square up to our trauma, then we can move forward. But not before then, because racialized trauma is so much about lack of choice and lack of being seen and heard fully. So that in and of itself can be part of the healing process.
I love that. I love everything you just articulated. And it makes me want to bring the question a little bit deeper into how do we give ourselves permission to stop bypassing our lived experiences as women of color?
Yeah, this one is a little tricky because I feel like modernity has set us up to fail around this in being so isolated. The words that come through me, they come from my experience and they come from teachers who have given me both instructions, like do this, do that, here's ceremony, here's protocol, blah, 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 blah. And then also from mentors, elders, and teachers who have given me directions, like just do it. I wanted to highlight a person named Phoenix Smith, who is the founder of the Alliance for Ecotherapy and Social Justice. And I got on the line with her one time and I was like, I'm afraid to put it on my website that I do this land-based practices because I don't have a certification. And Phoenix was like, you think that white cis het men ask permission before they do stuff? No, you're more qualified than most people to do this. Do it. And so sometimes we need someone to give us permission because we have been indoctrinated to ask for help and ask for guidance. And we want to hold that alongside kind of what I touched on earlier, where it's like, what is my intuition telling me? Is it okay to have a really, really strong, warrior self that is unapologetically looking for what's in our best interest. And when I say our, I mean like all the parts of me and the land bits, like all the relations. So that in and of itself is a little bit of, it's a risk, right? Like it takes a leap of faith for us to be willing to step outside the way that we have been conditioned. And modern culture does not set us up to do that very well. The messages that we get is that we always need a certification, we need permission, we need a leader. And sometimes it's helpful to have a guide, to have a mentor. And so keep talking, like keep talking with your friends and family and people you can trust and say like, hey, I'm thinking about giving myself permission to let myself off the hook. And go where it's warm when you have these conversations. Because there are certain people that are really warm and will have your back and will, challenge you in really constructive ways. And then there are other people that aren't there in their journey yet. And they're like, oh, well, I martyr myself in this way. It's not like we say that, but we say that. And I find value for myself by martyring myself in this way.
Right.
And it's like, that's not feasible for organisms. Organisms are not robots. We need to rest. We need to rejuvenate and go inside. Winter happens for a reason. And so can we give ourselves permission to actually be in a winter, whether it's for the morning or whether it's for a season? Yeah, this one is a tricky one. And I want to encourage women to not give up. Don't give up. Continue to try giving yourself permission because it takes practice. All of this is a practice that builds on itself over time.
And Chelsea, that's the perfect segue into the question I love asking you ladies. What are some things, 1, 2, or 3, whatever you want to choose, what are some things that women should give themselves permission to stop doing right now?
That's a beautiful question. What ought women give themselves permission? Believing the urgency.
Okay.
Urgency is a characteristic of white supremacy. It is a characteristic of capitalism. And urgency causes some of the greatest harms I've seen. So when someone approaches you with something that brings up a sense of like now, or else, or or I'll be disappointed in you, give yourself permission to let go of their urgency because it is not your urgency. And the female body is extracted from in such violent and repetitive and normalized ways.
Mm-hmm.
That this is one of the ways that in our own bodies, we have the agency to say, you do not get to extract from me in that way. I am my own. And think of it like a weather system. The urgency comes in hot, like a storm.
Yes.
But your body is a mountain. You are a mountain. The mountain remains regardless of the storm. You are not the tree on the side of the mountain being beat and bent and all of this. You are the mountain. So when the storm comes, you can watch the storm and maybe your surface is affected. Maybe there's like a bit of a snow avalanche or something. Like you acknowledge that this is a big storm, but it's not your storm.
I love that. And Chelsea, is there anything that you want to share with the listeners that I haven't asked you already?
Let's see. I think there's a thought that was kind of mulling over in my head. So and it actually kind of builds on the last question, which is about permission. And I want to give folks permission to find land-based practices where you are. For example, I was working with somebody who was deeply, deeply depressed. She had trouble getting out of bed. She was flunking out of college. She was losing her job. The depression was brutal. And so one day we were sitting there and we were doing talk therapy inside. And I asked her, like, tell me about your morning. Tell me about your routine. And so she said, well, I don't make my bed every day. I don't get dressed every day, but I do wash my face every day. And I said, oh, so you commune with water every day. And the tears came. I'm actually getting emotional thinking about it. But like, then the tears came and then the emotions came and something undammed. There was a dam that had been there that needed to flood. And like somebody could have said, oh, there's no way that she could have accessed land-based practices. But she was actually, this was the one thing that her body was doing every day, was communing with water, this face washing that she would do. And it was something that like brought her just the tiniest amount of relief. So even when you think you can't be in touch with land-based practices, you can smudge, you can light a candle, you can water your plant, you can water yourself. But anything that brings you closer to the elements, bring a stone from outside, find a stone that calls to you, ask its permission to pick it up, bring it into your bed, sleep with this stone. The stone is the oldest ancestor we have on earth. We call him Grandfather Mountain or Grandfather Stone. So it's even if you're hearing me and you think that this isn't for you or it's not accessible for you, I am telling you that is colonization. No matter the body you are in, that is colonization that is lying to you. And it is your birthright as an organism on this planet to be in good relation with the elements of the earth. So I'll just leave that.
I love it. No, even I'm getting a little teary-eyed over here because it's just like giving permission, the release. It's like, no, your view of yourself is not wrong. It is built off of a false construct meant to hold you back and to hold you down. And no, that is not okay. It's just kind of flowing through me right now. So I can't thank you enough for coming to this conversation and sharing your insights on reconnection to land, reconnection to self, and giving ourselves permission to be what we need to be versus somebody else's idea of us. Chelsea,
Yes.
Where can everyone find you if they want to connect with you?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I don't really do social media, but I do have a website. And my website is drchelseawilliams.com.
Okay. And I will link to it in the show notes as well, everyone. And Chelsea is quite an amazing being. And I encourage you, if you feel drawn to reach out and connect with her directly. And until next time, I'll see you soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of Practice Dirty. Please support this podcast by subscribing on iTunes or Spotify and leaving us a rating. If you're looking for the best self-guided mindfulness and discovery tools available for women over the age of 40, head over to michaelarose.com. I'll see you next time.